What's going on, guys? This is Empty Box, and this is Assetto Corsa, where today we're going to be taking a look at the Mercedes-Benz SLS AMG that was released as part of the Assetto Corsa Early Access version 0.22 update, which also added in the Nürburgring Sprint circuit, which I'm not going to be driving in this video because it's the same thing as the Grand Prix circuit, only with a shortcut after the arena section, which means that it's boring, it's bland, it's boring, it's bland. And it's the same thing as the Grand Prix circuit, which means it's boring and bland and boring and bland. So instead, we're going to be driving at a much more fun circuit, and that'd be Donington Park. This is a mod add-on track. I'll go ahead and put a link down in the description, and this is actually the first scratch-built track released for Assetto Corsa. It's also a great fit for Assetto Corsa because when you have a lot of 600 horsepower street cars, want a track that's good for 600 horsepower street cars, and Donington Park is definitely good for 600 horsepower street cars. And because we are driving a 600 horsepower street car, we are driving on street tires. The track has been set to a slow grip setting, which basically means less grip from the tires, less grip from the track, more sideways, more challenging to drive, more fun. Yeah. I've been having an absolute blast with this car at this track. And just, yeah. But besides the content, and perhaps even more importantly than the content, there have been updates to the tire physics, which also creates updates to the force feedback, as they're all linked together these days in these fancy racing simulations. In their words, it results in a more alive steering feel. In my words, it results in a much better overall game, much more fun to drive. Force feedback was not one of Assetto Corsa's strong suits previously. I'd have to say that force feedback and sounds were probably the two weak links within Assetto Corsa. And well, the sound update to the F-Mod sound engine hasn't occurred with this update, much to some people's disappointment, but the force feedback has improved. Is it great? Is it tremendous? Is it the same level as R Factor 2? No, it is not. But it is much better than where it was. And that results in a much more exciting to drive car, as well as the changes to the tire physics once again creates that predictability that Assetto Corsa originally had, but had lost somewhere along the way, in my opinion. You know, one of the great things with Assetto Corsa originally was just the way that the car came out of the slide and how it was right. You know, you would slide a car around and you wouldn't just instantly regain your grip like that. You know, you could feel the grip build back up. You could feel it progressively come and go as you go through the corner, as you start sliding around like a hooligan. That was pretty cool. But you know, you could have that progressive feeling, which made cars actually very easy to drive, even if they weren't necessarily easy to drive, because you could actually tell what was going on and what kind of inputs to make. For example, this car, talking about, you know, roughly 600 horsepower on street tires on a track without a lot of grip. It's like, yeah, this should be more difficult to drive than, for example, you know, the Fiat 500. However, I actually find this easier to drive than the Fiat 500 because of the fact that, well, it clicks with me. I understand its language. I know what it's saying. I understand it, and I can make those corrections. I know what's going on. I have a better judgment feel for it through what I'm seeing on screen, through my force feedback steering wheel, you know? So it's actually a more difficult car, but it's actually easier because it makes sense. But if this was the previous version, a couple of previous versions of Assetto Corsa, I can guarantee you that would have resulted in basically counter steer, and then all of a sudden all of the front grip in the world is now available, and around you go in the opposite direction every single time. which fortunately this update has definitely toned that down to the point where the McLaren 12C, which in my opinion was a car that was very susceptible to that counter steer, super mega front grip, and away you go feeling, is actually a blast to drive. You know, I'd say that the SLS here is the hooligan's car, while the 12C is the professional's car. You know, it's much more fun to actually drive that car in a more civilized fashion, driving for time, and you could actually tell the difference in the cars, and the fact that, you know, the McLaren is significantly lighter. You know, it does have better handling, it is more predictable. You know, it stops a little bit quicker thanks to the lower weight of the car. But, you know, you could feel the differences in the car and the way they wanted to be driven. Like, this car is just begging constantly to go sideways, whereas the 12C, you really had to tell it to go sideways. Of course, if you did tell it to go sideways, it would definitely go sideways, and you could actually play around with it. But see, there you see again, that's just letting the force feedback, letting the wheel do its thing. You know, working with the car, which is something that previously wasn't really happening all that much. Now the force feedback, you know, it's not R Factor 2 force feedback, it's not that good, but it works, it gets the job done, it's functional. Still probably the weak link within Assetto Corsa, that and the sounds, but it at least is there and at least helps. It doesn't feel like a giant spring anymore. And anytime you can get that sideways and just have no problems at all, just puts a smile on your face, regardless. I have to say that Assetto Corsa needs to get a Corvette in here stat. Or a Viper, but I know that ain't gonna happen. Which, at least if I remember correctly, they do have a Corvette license, although they did kind of make me scratch my head when they said they'll have a Corvette C7R GT3 licensed, which doesn't exist. Yeah. Does nobody understand sports car racing classes? Anyways, let's go ahead and transfer this into a conversation about Assetto Corsa. It's been a while since this game came out, and I'm in way too deep. Feel the rear end moving around there. Just turn it into a drift like we meant to do that. It's been out for a while now. It's been one of these very long, roaming, wandering, early access projects. And honestly, despite the fact that you just heard me say that it's much better and it's improved and I like it, I'm having fun with it, it's been a very long time since this went into early access, as well as the fact that this game was supposed to be launched, released, final, finished, finito, you know, out the door and shipped to Steam for mass consumption, which is what happened with early access anyways, but that's a different story for a different day, in like 2012. And we're still in early access, and there's, oh my goodness, look, Toyota license. It's just like, when does it end? When does 1.0 come around? When does this game officially release? And I'm not saying, release it now, release it now, release it now. Quite the opposite, really. You know, you look at things like where the AI is and how bad they are, and there have been AI improvements, and for the most part they are improvements, but it's still bad. It's like, when is that actually going to be fixed? Will it be fixed? Will this game ever actually get out of early access? Which I think for, you know, a lot of the sim racing community doesn't necessarily matter. You know, you look at iRacing, for example. That's been a project that's been ongoing for a decade. It's been available for 6 years, and they're still doing things with it. You know, you got R Factor 2 that's been around for, you know, 2.5 years at this point since its first beta release. I'm sure to some people that will sound very strange because they don't realize that R Factor 2 is actually out of beta. But it's just slightly alarming, and by slightly I mean really kind of alarming. Not that I'm projecting doom and gloom, or that I'm not going to ever finish this project, but it's just kind of head-scratching. And it's also kind of upsetting because if you know the history with Kunos, you will know Netcar Pro and what happened there and how that game was basically abandoned entirely until he finally picked it up and finished the game. And you know, a lot of things have changed on that side of things. So there, you know, hopefully they won't have that issue, and the studio's obviously growing and everything like that. But it just, I don't know, you know, with the whole time frame that we had been told, and now everything has managed to be late. For example, in September, I believe we were originally told that the Nürburgring, the Nordschleife, would be released alongside a DLC pack, you know, 6 months after release, which put the release back in March. And obviously those are tentative windows, but it's like, it's pretty clear that the game still isn't quite ready for release in many areas. And it's kind of alarming because you get that feeling that, will these guys ever finish it? Will they pull it off? And even then, when they do finish it, when they do pull it off, what will be Assetto Corsa? And recently it's kind of, I've kind of been looking at it, and the comparisons, you know, that everybody in the sim racing community likes to make. And I see Assetto Corsa kind of taking up the spot of R Factor, you know, with all the mods, various qualities, a lot of good mods, you know, really top-notch experiences, but also a lot of crap mods. But will that actually happen for Assetto Corsa? Because I'm just not sure that a title that is early access on Steam can really have that success in that regards. Now, of course, early access is now the new full release these days. But it's like, there's just that lack of polish, that lack of finish. I'm just not entirely sure that they're going to be able to apply. And by the time they do apply it, where will everyone else be? I don't know, there's an interesting future for Assetto Corsa. I really think its X-Factor feature, you know, that sets it apart from the other sims is going to be the modability, which is what we're already, you know, starting to see in various quality levels. But at the same time, I see stuff like, you know, the announced two-door United Sports Car Series mod. That's well and dandy, and I'm definitely looking forward to it. But at the same time, nighttime pit stops. Yeah, that pit stops is kind of a big deal. It's like the community has become so invested in it. And I'm not just talking about that specific mod or anything like that. But where there's major flaws and major issues, like for example pit stops. And no, this isn't just a video about pit stops, just using that as an example. Things that still need to be done, but again, we were already told that this game was supposed to release 2 years ago. Which, okay, things change and everything like that, and I understand it, but it's just like, you know, we keep seeing these licenses announced and everything like that, and it's like, just finish the dang game, okay? At this point, it's just, honestly, find new license announcements for Assetto Corsa quite annoying for that reason. It's like, I'm glad to see that there will be new content, but let's not talk about new content at this point. other than what's already done. And I think that's something that a lot of people kind of missed the boat on. With the Assetto Corsa, when they originally came out to early access on Steam, they had the 2-week, every other Friday update cycle. A lot of people were going crazy. We're like, oh yeah, this game's going to be out in an instant, you know, and we kind of were led to believe that, I think. But, you know, you saw that update cycle, but a lot of people don't seem to understand that a lot of that content had been previewed years before, so it probably wasn't even stuff that they did anything to. They just had it ready to go. You know, the work was already done, so it may have looked like there was a superb development cycle and they were cranking out cars, you know, doing 3 cars every 2 weeks, just chugging away, just being an absolute beast of development team, you know, but wasn't necessarily the case. I don't know, I'm just starting to think that by the time that they actually finish, air quotes, you know, understanding that this is a sim racing title and ongoing development is the norm, but when it hits that level where it's polished enough to be finished and then the extension of it can happen, that by then, you know, will R Factor 2 have been brushed up to its absolute gold standard could be, you know. So it's just kind of interesting to see how this timing will all play out, because I think Assetto Corsa really has an advantage in the marketplace, in the sense that it is on Steam, the modding community is there, it is much more alive than what the other sims currently are. But you also got Project Cars out there, which, you know, maybe not for me, maybe not for you, but I think for a lot of people, Project Cars is going to steal a lot of thunder away from, you know, your Assetto Corsa, R Factor 2, iRacing, Game Stock Car. You know, it's the same way, like, when I do this video, I can almost guarantee you somebody's going to say, what should be my first sim? And instantly, somebody's going to be like, Assetto Corsa! And I'll quickly say Game Stock Car. But, you know, Assetto Corsa has this hype to it, and as time goes by, it's losing that hype. And I think a lot of it was false hype, a lot of it was, you know, people just like buying into it and not necessarily expecting it. I mean, this isn't necessarily a shock to me. This is something I've been kind of waiting for a chance to say, and I figure, hey, I'm going sideways in an SLS, so why not? Now's a perfect time. Is it not? I mean, doesn't everybody have conversations? Well, we're going sideways. Doesn't everybody chit-chat? Chit-chat and counter-steer at the same time. And I'm going to make a pit stop, except for the fact that you can't make a pit stop. So, hope you guys enjoyed. Bye.